Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender, where we give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll the dice they deserve. I'm your host, Game Master George, and today we will be taking a look at a module for Exalted. We'll go through the premise, characters, scenes, and some ways to update the module to 3rd edition. Fair warning, there will be significant spoilers for this module, so if you're looking to play through it rather than run it, stop the video now. So what module will we be looking at? Well, since we just completed it in our actual play series, link here and in the description if you'd like to see how it went, we'll be looking at the 2nd edition module, Daughter of Nexus. If this sounds interesting and you'd like to come back for more of our tutorials, module reviews, or play examples, be sure to subscribe and click that bell to be notified when our next videos go live. But now let's get started with our look into the module, Daughter of Nexus. Beginning with the background, this adventure takes place in the city of Nexus in the east. It is an independent city, free from direct control from the realm. This makes it a common location for solar characters. Not that they're truly welcome there, but they don't have the same fear of the realm hunting them as when they are within the realm's territory. The central idea here is that the god of the city has an illegitimate child, Freespirited Arvia. This is a problem for 2 reasons. First, Jen secretly serves on the Council of Nexus, a conflict of interests which would be seen as a crime and would likely lead to his execution if exposed. The existence of Arvia threatens to point people toward this secret. Second, and much more troubling, Arvia has her own connection to the city, having inherited some of her father's blood. In the wrong hands, she could supplant her father, becoming the new god of Nexus, and then be used to enable something far worse. We'll meet some of those wrong hands shortly. Our heroes will be called upon to protect Arvia from those who mean her harm. One last thing before we dive into the characters, I am awful at pronouncing names. As such, some of these names will be horribly mangled. I mean, no offense to anyone who might share a name with any of these characters, and I welcome you mocking me in the comments. So, who are the players in this game? This adventure sports a wide variety of types of characters, pulling from different types of supernaturals and even mortals. This makes it a nice starting point for an Exalted game, a chance to dive deep into the different types of beings that make up this world. First, of course, is our living MacGuffin, Freespirited Arvia. Arvia is the god-blooded child of the city god of Nexus. She's meant to be played as the living embodiment of freedom, and she acts as a bit of group fixing when she's with a low-level party. She's able to spontaneously call upon the power of her blood to manifest a necessary trick which the party might be lacking. However, her desire for freedom is meant to be a thorn in the side of the party, leading her to make questionable choices in the name of freedom, which may put her in danger. An excellent trait for somebody you're trying to protect. Then we have our antagonist, Veil of Ebon Blades, a day-cast abyssal. Veil is described as a once beautiful and still voluptuous woman, with body-length black veils sewn into her body. The adventure gives a nice bit of backstory for her, talking about her life before the Black Exaltation, but in truth, it sadly doesn't matter much. Unless the party fails the mission, there is unlikely to be a moment when the party can talk to this silent killer. So while I appreciate the backstory as a cool bit of fiction, it doesn't play much into the story. Her goal is to claim Arvia for her master, the Death Lord, the Walker in Darkness, who intends to use Arvia to transform Nexus into a Shadowland under his control. She is meant to be a terrifying opponent, a literal monster of death with her massive grim scythe. Next up, we have 2 mortal members of the main cast. The first is Hierarch Artemisia Sapphire. Artemisia serves on the Guild Directorate and is the spark that triggers the adventure. She seeks to gain wealth and power, and does not care what might come as a result of her deals. As such, she is seeking to acquire Arvia to sell to the highest bidder. Artemisia is intended to be an abrasive figure. Your PCs should absolutely be rubbed the wrong way by her, but not badly enough to flatly refuse the job she offers. The second mortal member is another member of the Guild Directorate, Hierarch Devora Odom. Where Artemisia seeks power and wealth above all, Devora seeks a more level approach. As such, she sees the risks in Artemisia's plan, and the devastation that would be caused if her plan should succeed. Thus, she will seek to turn the PCs from their path, to bring Arvia to a different destination than Artemisia. Finally, we take a look at the secondary antagonists. Lily and Lilac are Fae twins living in Nexus. Well, in truth, they're 2 halves of the same wild entity. They are separate, able to act independently, but forever connected. Together, they seek to claim Arvia through a deal with Artemisia. Once they have her, their plan is a bit more open-ended than Veil's. This could give them a foothold in heaven, or perhaps a way to destabilize Nexus enough that it could be dissolved back into the wild. Lily is the charismatic of the pair, seeking power gains through persuasion, trickery, or seduction. Lilac is the warrior, with her army of fey creatures ready to ride. Now with the cast established, let's jump into the adventure itself. To start off, let's talk about the formatting of the module. Exalted is very difficult to create modules for, with PCs being truly built as railroad-shattering creatures. So instead of them being a purely linear series of challenges for the PCs to overcome, we have a flowchart of scenes that the players could possibly follow. Act 1 leads up to the retrieval of Arvia and is, as such, fairly linear. There is a set endpoint, so you can feel confident in being able to chart the path the PCs will take. Act 2 deals with what the PCs will do with Arvia, and is as such much more open-ended. The act begins with the attempt to leave the underground, but once they are above, there are 4 suggested scenes, of which you could use any of them you like. Once any number of them are completed, the act ends with Arvia being kidnapped by Veil. This is the hardest part to sell in my opinion, but we'll talk more about that later. Act 3 then finishes with Veil's attempts to flee. Depending on the tools available to the party, this may culminate in them being able to trap her in the city, or needing to chase her through the surrounding countryside. This leads to the final confrontation, a deadly battle with a powerful agent of the underworld. So let's start talking about the scenes. We start off with Deals in Sapphire, which, if you couldn't tell, is about making a deal with Sapphire. In this scene, Hierarch Artemisia Sapphire is hiring the party to go beneath the city, find the girl Arvia, and bring her back to Artemisia. Now, there are a few things to keep in mind when playing out this scene. First, no matter any considerations which may follow, Artemisia wants the players to take the deal. She needs them to acquire Arvia. Second, Artemisia is not going to be forthright with information. Unless a very good reason comes up, she is unlikely to divulge much information about Arvia, and she will almost certainly not tell the party about her plan to sell the girl to the fair folk. Finally, Artemisia is an abrasive person. While she won't try to drive the PCs away, she is not going to be kind. She's also going to try to wring the party for all she can, trying to get the best deal possible. She isn't a pushover and knows the power of her position and wealth. In the end, you want the party to have come out of this scene agreeing to take the job, but being distrustful or otherwise irritated with Artemisia. This negative feeling will be used later when it comes time for her opposition to offer a counter. Once agreed to, Artemisia will tell the party about a path that will lead them to the girl, through the Nighthammer district. At this point, the parties head underground in the scene Nighthammer Chaos. This is another short scene where they will head through a foundry to access the Undercity. The challenge here is nothing major. As the PCs are heading down the tunnel, they will feel a rising heat. Turning, they see a wave of molten metal rushing toward them. It is up to their ingenuity and charms to survive the coming rush of copper death. Assuming they don't become a new art installation, they can proceed underground or return above to investigate the event. It is here when they can possibly get their first warning about the existence of Veil of Ebon Blades. If they beat Veil's Wits plus Investigation roll, they can learn that somebody obviously tried to kill them. It was no accident. If they manage to beat her by 2 or more, they will find a piece of black gauze wrapped around a broken skull. This will play in well to information they'll gain later, but if your PCs or players themselves are new to the world, they may not know what exactly this information points toward. But I would suggest a lore roll to point the player who finds it toward its necromantic origin. After the investigation, they can continue heading underground. The next scene, Wonders of the Lost Hollow, finally gives your players a taste of combat. The PCs, having descended into the ruined city of Hollow, will find themselves in a ruined city square. The only way forward, a flight of stairs leading to a long, wide hall, lined with columns and statues. As they reach the midpoint of the room, the statues spring to life and attack the trespassers. Not much to say here. It's a pretty straightforward combat. If you're running in 3rd edition, I recommend making the stone soldiers into a battle group, with the brass legionnaire being a single creature. The combat shouldn't give the party of Exalts much trouble, but it serves to teach the PCs the basics of combat. One thing of note, try to describe the room being damaged during the fight. It will act as foreshadowing to part of the next scene. Moving from the combat, they push deeper into Hollow. As they come upon a seemingly run-down manse, they hear a woman scream from inside. Assuming they rush forward to help, they will see hobgoblins assaulting a young woman. When they see the party coming, however, they will flee deeper into the tunnels. This young woman is, of course, Freespirited Arvia. Give the party some time to interact with her, calm her down, and learn a bit more about her than what Artemisia has shared. The party should come out of this encounter with Arvia in tow, likely willingly unless the party was very rude, and prepare to return above ground. At which point the way back will collapse due to the damage incurred during the previous fight. This forces them to go deeper into Hollow, toward the Fire Wander district. This brings us out of Act 1 and toward the more open-ended part of the story. The scene Fire Wanderer is where things ramp up on weirdness. The PCs make their way through the depths and are unexpectedly greeted by the light of the surface. However, as they observe it, they notice it's an unnatural light, not from the unconquered sun or Luna. This false sun shines down as a maze of hedges spring up around them. The PCs must navigate this maze if they hope to reach the true surface. I know what you're thinking. Mazes are awful. No one has fun in a maze except for the game master, who gets to cackle inwardly as players make a wrong turn which they had no way of knowing was wrong. However, this maze is done right. Rather than players needing to actually navigate the maze, it's an extended skill challenge as the PCs navigate. Each roll has a difficulty of 3, and any beyond 3 are added to the total pool. Now, that's not to say it's easy. The maze shifts every so often, which doesn't actually change the numbers, but serves to illustrate that this isn't a maze to be solved in the traditional way. After getting a total pool of 30 successes, the PCs will notice that the changes in the maze have become a bit sluggish, and it does seem possible to outrun. After another 20 are added to the pool, the party bursts from the exit, and the maze melts away. Now, while the concept is interesting, it is still a challenge which amounts to little more than rolling dice until you get the number needed. Success is practically inevitable, if slow, so there's no real threat involved, except that this is where Lily, one half of the twin Fae, makes her home. After the first navigation roll is made, Lily will emerge from the wall of the maze to speak with the party. In between navigation attempts, she will appear to banter with the party and negotiate for their release in exchange for the girl. She is upfront and honest. She wants the girl so she can remove Nexus from the loom of fate and draw it into the wild. Lily won't attack the party, but she will try tricks and all sorts of bargaining to get what she wants, so be creative with her. Once the PCs eventually escape the maze, it is time for them to re-emerge into Nexus proper. It's here where the story splits. The next scenes can be done in any order, as many or as few as you like. As the story progresses afterwards with the kidnapping of Arvia, it's best to end this split with either of the combat scenes, as these give the most chaos for Arvia to disappear during. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take a look at these 4 scenes. The first option is the social scene Daughter of Nexus. In this scene, soldiers of Hierarch Devora Odom locate the PCs prior to their turning Arvia over to Artemisia. She requests to meet with them, and, assuming that they agree to the meet, will warn the PCs about the dire consequences of turning Arvia over to Artemisia. Presumably, the party will then decide against handing her over, in which case Devora could offer to contact the emissary of Nexus, or even the girl's father. Either option will take time, however, so she leaves Arvia in their capable hands. If they reject Devora's advice, however, or if they insult Devora, she will instead let the PCs leave with the girl, and send her soldiers later to forcibly collect her. Assuming, however, that doesn't happen, Devora will warn them about a death cult that's active in the city. If the party found the skull earlier, this could serve as confirmation that they are being hunted by this cult. However, Devora does not know about the involvement of Veil of Ebon Blades. This bit of missing information is crucial and will have devastating consequences. Now, leaving this scene, it can easily lead into any of the other 3 optional scenes. The second option is Slaughter in the Streets of Nexus. This overly wordy title is nonetheless a good description of what happens in it. As the PCs escort Arvia through the streets, they are approached by the death cult mentioned by Devora. These cultists are in truth little more than commoners. They come at the group armed with household knives, but en masse. Truthfully, they're not a huge threat. The bigger threat are the nemissaries with them. These spirits lie in wait for one of the cultists to be struck down. They then possess the body, rising as a zombie. They will continue doing this until they run out of bodies, or Vale is successful in abducting Arvia. Once the fighting is over, Arvia may be gone. Whether she is or not, mercenary police are called by the fighting and swiftly approach. This in itself could prompt Arvia to flee from the mercenaries, as they have a cruel reputation, and could cause the kidnapping if it hasn't happened already. Or these could be Devora's mercenaries, coming to summon the PC to the meeting described previously. The third option is another social one. What about Arvia? This scene can be plugged in after any other, or at any point really, though it does fit best if it happens sometime after the meeting with Devora. In this short scene, the PCs have a chance to talk to Arvia to find out what she wants, as opposed to what all these other forces want for her. There's not much more to say here. There's no real actions, goals, or consequences. It's just a chance to character build, and maybe solidify Arvia as someone that they want to protect, rather than someone they're forced to. This scene could easily be interrupted by either of the combat scenes, or even the approach of Devora's mercenaries. The final of these optional scenes is another combat one, Lilacs Crusade. In this scene, Lilac, Lily's other half, tires of waiting for Lily's schemes to deliver Arvia, and decides to take matters into her own hands. She's been studying the mercenaries of Nexus to learn their weaknesses, and now leads an army of hobgoblins and griffins into Nexus. This becomes a mass combat scene, as the PCs must fight their way through the invading army of fey creatures. In the ensuing chaos, Vale may take the moment to strike and steal Arvia away. Or perhaps Lilac herself could claim the girl. Though this isn't covered much by the module, you could easily change the ending to be a climactic battle between the twin fair folk rather than with the Abyssal. Of the combat scenes, this is the one with the larger impact. First, yes, it is likely to lead to Arvia being kidnapped, the immediate problem. Second, this very much weakens the infrastructure of Nexus, which could put it on a negative footing when it comes to its current standing as independent from the realm. Thankfully, the realm has its own issues, but there are other forces which could try to come in, making this a secondary problem. The third issue, and possibly most dangerous, is that the public appearance of the Fae, plus likely rumors of the Exalts fighting them, would eventually make their way back to the Wild Hunt. This could set them after the party, leading to a harrowing confrontation. But that is well outside the scope of this module. At the end of whichever of these scenes you choose to run, Arvia will be kidnapped. This is, in my opinion, the weakest moment of the module. Few parties are going to let Arvia get far from them willingly, so you'll need to actively work to separate her from the party. This can feel cheap and unsatisfying, and I wasn't particularly thrilled by it. In the end, I made it work by giving Vale some disguise and stealth abilities, which would allow her to stealthily replace Arvia with a disguised cultist from the slaughter scene, but it still felt awkward to me. However you do it, Arvia is taken by an unknown entity. This leads to the scene Freespirited Kidnapping, where the party will need to use their investigative abilities to determine who has taken Arvia. Following the standard path, this would be Vale. If they succeed their search, it points them toward Vale as the culprit, though not where she might be. It's a very straightforward moment, but it highlights a problem that I have with most investigative games. Basically, the entirety of the adventure comes down to whether they can pass this one investigation check. If they succeed, they get the clue. If they fail, well, what do they do now? The module says you can have some bystander or sidereal in disguise come and give them a clue, but that gives the discovery little weight and sets a bad precedent for the future. It is for this reason that I chose to use the cultist attack as the moment when Vale took Arvia. Even if they had not found the skull, there would have been enough information gleaned from the other events that this is connected to the death cult. Once the party knows that Arvia has been taken, they need to give chase. But first, they're approached by guild mercenaries. Starting the scene, the chase is on, where there is no chase. Okay, poorly named, but we can ignore that. The party needs to convince the mercenaries to help them out, to lock the city down so Arvia cannot be taken out of the city. If they succeed, Vale is trapped, and the party can begin hunting her down. But if they fail, Vale is free to escape, and the party will need to chase her down across the surrounding countryside. Or, like my party did, they can attempt to sneak away before the mercenaries arrive. Why yes, players, your 10-foot-tall mountain of a man and god-blooded horse large enough to carry him are definitely able to sneak away. Spoiler, they failed. If the party convinces the mercenaries to shut down the city, Vale flees into an ancient solar tomb from the First Age, wherein lies a miniature Shadowland. It is here that she intends to wait for her pursuers and end the hunt. Her breaking into the tomb alerts the Council of Entities to the trespass, which will in turn send the information to the party. They can then descend into the tomb to give chase. This is less a single scene and more a series of challenges you can throw at your party, little mini-tasks for them to complete as they journey through this dark place. Whenever you tire of the challenges, you can move on to the final confrontation. But before we get there, there is another possibility. If the party fails to lock down the city, we get the scene Flight to the Shadowland, where Vale flees on a deathly horse to the west. The party must give chase and reach her before she reaches the Shadowland to the west. Like with Into the Tomb, this scene represents a number of skill challenges to indicate the various hurdles of the journey and of tracking their quarry. And like before, when you're ready to move on, we go to the final confrontation. Once the hunt is over, the fight begins in To Die and Dream No More. Vale waits in the shadow to launch an ambush at the players. This is the final moment, an all-out brawl with a powerful entity. If your party is beastly in combat, bring in some zombies to provide another target and increase the pressure. In the end though, Vale should fall and the party retrieve Arvia. From there, the module is complete. They can go back and collect some rewards, tie up some loose ends, and move on to the next adventure. In the end, I think this is a very nice module for introducing players to some of the various supernatural elements at play in this world. It's also nice for a game master, as it presents a general framework for planning out future adventures. So I definitely think it's a good module to look at when starting a new game. Now, this is a 2nd edition module, but it's easy enough to update to 3rd edition using the bestiary in the core book. There are 5 possible combat encounters, 5 possible social, and a handful of mental ones scattered about. For the mental ones, you can basically leave them as is, not much is needed to adjust them. Then, when it comes to the social challenges, I'd recommend using the quick characters to get their social influence and defense values, but ignoring the combat bits. If the party decides to attack either of the hierarchs, the poor NPC stands no chance of fighting back. Meanwhile, if they choose to kill Arvia, something has gone horribly wrong with your setup, and you are going wildly off module anyway. So improvise some cool powers for her to fight back with. They should each be fairly middling in their stats, but Arvia should be lower on the Guile side. You'll find these rules starting on page 494 in the core book. Now, Lily is an exception here, but she's an easy one to deal with. Use the Fairfolk Lorelei on page 535 as a base, but lower its dice pool by 2 to 4 dice depending on your party's social acumen. Likewise, reduce the Resolve and Guile by probably 1 each, unless your party has a serious social monster. You want your party to actually be able to possibly converse with the thing. Meanwhile, you can mostly ignore the charms and focus on the roleplay, though Thousand Tiny Hooks technique would be fun to pull out and possibly scare them. With the combat, there is a bit more to do. The 5 combats have a total of 9 different creatures, so let's go combat by combat. First up is the statue fight. Here we have the stone statues and brass legionnaire. The stone statues are mostly minor threats, so use a battle group to represent them. For both, use the walking statue stats on page 500, using the battle group rules for the stone statues, and just the straight stat block for the brass legionnaire. Next up, we have the cultist fight. There are actually 3 creature types here, but the party should only need to interact with 2. We have the cultists, the zombies, and the nemissaries. For the cultists, again you want a battle group. They are individually weak, so use the conscript stats on page 496 to create the battle group. The zombies are easy as well. They have a ready-made stat block within the book. You'll find it on page 502. Finally, there is the Nemissary. This really shouldn't need to be fought off, and is a terrifying opponent to face. Thus, you can really ignore its stats. They will possess corpses, and that's about all that's in the scope of the adventure. However, should somebody force it into combat as a spirit, use the stats for a Nephrak on page 507 to give them a good scare. Just don't break out its actual powers. It will overwhelm a starting party. As a side note, Vale is likely to be present for this fight, but she should not show herself. She is there to kidnap Arvia, not to fight. The other possible large combat is the Fair Folk invasion. The hobgoblins you will find on page 535, but the griffins aren't statted in the core book. So to easily represent them, I would use the Manticore on page 538, but remove the sting attacks. The hobgoblins I would probably represent as a battle group, whereas I would drop in a pair of the griffins, maybe more or less depending on your specific group's combat capabilities, as individual combatants to back up the true threat, Lilac. For Lilac, use the Fair Folk Cataphract on page 534. This should make for a suitably intimidating combatant to serve as the centerpiece for this encounter. Finally, you have the combat with Vale. For this, I really wish there was a better resource for building enemies, but for now, use the Wandering Death Knight on page 550, subbing in a Grim Scythe for the Dire Lance. To customize it, go pull charms from Stealth, Larceny, and Athletics solar charm trees. This will let you get that assassin feel. With that, you have some quick and dirty conversions to use this 2nd edition module for 3rd edition. Honestly, I think it can work well, but remember to adjust the fights for your specific party. Some parties may have all combat monsters, while others may prefer a social tact, and these groups will have very different outcomes with each fight. To help you with running this module, I've put together a PDF of tips for each scene, as well as the page references for the combat replacements. If you'd like to grab it, you can find it in our Discord or as a free post on our Patreon page. You'll find links to both in the description. Anyway, that about wraps up the Daughter of Nexus module. To sum it up, would I recommend it? Absolutely. It brings in a wide number of supernatural elements and a healthy variety to the challenges. My only complaint is with the hand-waving involved with the kidnapping of Arvia, but you can easily improvise around that when your specific party throws a wrench in the plan. If you're interested in this, you can pick up a PDF copy on DriveThruRPG at the link below. Disclaimer, this is an affiliate link, so we may receive a commission from your purchase. But hey, isn't that a good thing? You get a nice new module to run while supporting the channel. And speaking of supporting the channel, we are still newly Exalted here, so if you'd like a quick and easy way to show your support, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us to know what we're doing right, and to get in front of the dreaded algorithm. Meanwhile, if you'd like to chat with us more directly, join us on Twitch or our new Discord, links below. You can hang out and help us decide what new games or topics we're going to tackle next. Anyway, thank you again, and remember, there's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.